The abandoned school stood like a ghost on the edge of town, its windows shattered, its halls silent for decades. Locals avoided it, claiming strange noises echoed inside at night. One evening, a young woman entered the crumbling building, flashlight in hand, determined to prove the stories were nothing more than myths. Hours passed. By morning, the school was empty again, her belongings found near the doorway, but she was never seen. The old Grayridge School had been closed for nearly 40 years, its brick walls weathered by rain and time. Generations had passed through its classrooms before declining enrollment and structural decay forced the town to shutter it. Since then, the building had sat at the far end of a cracked road, surrounded by weeds and silence. Children told ghost stories about it, daring each other to touch the rusted front gate. Teenagers sneaked inside on dares, only to flee at the first sound of creaking floorboards. Adults spoke of it in hushed tones, saying the building had a memory of its own. Some swore they heard laughter in the empty halls. Others claimed lights flickered in the windows long after sunset. For most, the school was a place to avoid, but for Emma Clarke, 26 and restless, it was an opportunity. A hobbyist urban explorer, she had spent years documenting abandoned places, factories, houses, even an old theater, and posting her adventures online. Her videos always ended with the same tagline, "Every building tells a story." Emma had heard the rumors about Grayridge since childhood, and she decided it was time to face them head-on. Armed with her camera, a strong flashlight, and a stubborn determination, she told friends she'd be back within a few hours. "It's just a building," she laughed. "What's the worst that could happen?" She arrived just after dusk, the last light of day casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The school loomed ahead, its windows black, the front doors chained shut. She found an opening around the side, where a broken window gaped like a missing tooth. Sliding carefully inside, she landed on dusty tiles, the smell of mold and rust heavy in the air. The silence was thick, broken only by the crunch of her footsteps. She swept her flashlight across faded lockers, peeling paint, and a long hallway stretching into darkness. Dust floated in the beam like tiny ghosts. Emma spoke into her camera, her voice steady but tinged with nervous excitement. "Exploring Grayridge School. Locals say it's haunted. Let's see what we find." Room after room told the story of abandonment. Desks sat overturned, textbooks crumbled on the floor, chalkboards stained with faint writing that refused to fade. One message in particular caught her attention: "Don't stay after dark." The words were jagged, etched deep as if carved in desperation. Emma ran her fingers across the grooves, frowning. Deeper inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. She thought she heard a faint shuffle behind her, but when she turned, the hallway was empty. She pressed on, whispering into the camera about the strange tension. Her beam caught glimpses of faded murals, staircases leading into darkness, and doors that seemed to groan on their hinges. In one classroom, rows of desks still faced a blackboard scrawled with the remnants of a lesson. A child's drawing lay yellowed on the floor, stick figures holding hands beneath the sun. Emma picked it up, her breath catching. The paper was damp, as if it had been touched recently. She shook her head, laughing nervously. "Creepy, but it's just water damage," yet her voice wavered. An hour passed, though it felt longer. Her flashlight flickered once, twice. The batteries were fresh, but the beam grew weak. She swapped them with spares, her hands trembling slightly, telling herself it was just faulty equipment. Finally, she reached the gymnasium. The ceiling beams creaked overhead, and the wooden floor bowed beneath her steps. Her light swept across bleachers, shrouded in dust, and a basketball hoop hanging crookedly from the wall. In the center of the floor lay a pile of desks, stacked like a barricade. On the top desk, a single book sat open. Emma approached cautiously, camera trained on the strange sight. The book's pages fluttered, as though stirred by a breeze, though the air was still. She leaned closer, her flashlight trembling in her grip. The words on the page were blurred, but one phrase stood out, written over and over in jagged letters: "Don't follow the voices." Emma's breath quickened. She turned sharply, certain she'd heard something, a whisper, soft and broken, echoing through the vast gym. She aimed her light at the bleachers, but saw only shadows. Still, the whispers continued, low and rhythmic, threading through the silence of the abandoned school. Emma steadied her camera, forcing a smile. "Guess I'm not alone after all," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But the truth was dawning on her. Grayridge School wasn't empty. Emma steadied herself in the middle of the gymnasium, her flashlight beam trembling across the dust and broken wood. The whispers had been faint, like a trick of the wind, but now, as she strained to listen, they seemed more distinct. Children's voices, distant yet clear, rising and falling like the murmur of a classroom. Her breath quickened. "This is insane," she muttered, aiming her camera toward the bleachers. "There's no one here." But when she played back the audio seconds later, her skin prickled. The whispers had been captured, faint but undeniable. She left the gym quickly, retracing her steps into the dark hallway. The silence returned, but the air felt different, charged, as though the building itself were awake. She whispered into her camera. "Locals say they hear voices at night. I think I just did." The hallway stretched ahead, lined with classroom doors half open like waiting mouths. She peered into one, her light sweeping over dust-covered desks and a toppled globe. Another classroom revealed shelves of decaying books, pages eaten away by mold. On the chalkboard, faint writing still clung. Final exams, June 1981. It was as if time had frozen on the day the school was abandoned. Emma pressed deeper, her footsteps echoing. At the far end, she found a staircase descending into the basement. The door creaked as she opened it, a wave of cold air washing over her. She hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, but curiosity pushed her downward, one step at a time, her flashlight slicing through the blackness. The basement smelled of mildew and rust. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping water that echoed through the empty corridors. Old lockers lined the walls, their doors hanging open. She passed one and froze. Inside lay a child's shoe, small and weathered, resting alone on the rusted metal shelf. She swallowed hard, whispering to her camera, "How long has this been here?" Deeper still, she found a locked door with a narrow window at eye level. Dust coated the glass, but as she shined her light, something shifted inside. A shadow, tall and fleeting, moved across the darkness. Emma stumbled back, heart hammering, her breath loud in the silence. When she dared to look again, the room was empty. Only old chairs and broken shelves were visible. "I must be seeing things," she whispered. Yet her hands shook violently, betraying the fear creeping into her bones. She turned to leave, but the sound returned, the whispers, louder now, echoing off the stone walls, words tangled together, some sharp, some soft, like children speaking in unison. She pressed the camera closer, recording. The phrases chilled her blood. "She's here. Don't let her go." Emma ran. Her flashlight beam swung wildly, illuminating rusted lockers and dripping pipes as she bolted for the stairs. She burst back into the hallway above, gasping for breath, the silence of the upper floors somehow more suffocating than the voices below. She steadied herself, whispering into the lens, Okay, maybe that was enough for tonight." But even as she said it, she knew she wouldn't leave. Not yet. The school had shown her something, a glimpse of its hidden life, and she couldn't walk away without understanding more. Instead, she pushed deeper into the second floor. The stairwell groaned as she climbed, dust swirling around her feet. At the top, she entered a corridor where classroom doors were shut tight, unlike the open ones below. She pushed one open and froze. Inside, the desks were perfectly arranged, as if a class had ended only minutes earlier. Books lay open on some, pencils neatly lined on others. On the chalkboard, words written in stark white chalk glared back at her, "Stay with us." Emma's camera shook as she whispered, This wasn't here before." From somewhere down the hall, the sound of laughter rang out, high-pitched, unmistakably that of children, but Grayridge School had been empty for 40 years. Emma's pulse raced as the children's laughter faded into the silence of the second floor. She gripped her flashlight tighter, its beam wobbling across the desks that looked too perfect, too untouched. She told herself it was a trick of the mind, echoes in an old building, but the words on the chalkboard still stared at her. "Stay with us." Her voice trembled as she spoke into the camera. This feels staged, like someone's been here. But who would keep a room like this for 40 years? She panned the camera slowly, capturing each detail, the neat rows of desks, the open books, even a half-erased math equation still clinging to the board. Dust coated everything, but beneath it all, the arrangement felt fresh, as though the students had only just left. The hallway outside groaned as if under unseen weight. Emma froze, light fixed on the doorframe. The sound came again, slow, deliberate footsteps, each one echoing down the corridor. She whispered into the microphone, "Someone else is here." Gathering her courage, she stepped into the hall. The corridor stretched into darkness, lockers standing like sentinels against the walls. The footsteps ceased, replaced once more by faint whispers. This time she caught words. "Don't leave, stay. She belongs here." Her throat tightened. She forced herself to walk forward, each step louder than she intended. Her flashlight beam landed on a locker door that stood ajar. Something metallic glinted inside. She pulled the door open carefully. A necklace dangled from the hook. Silver chain, small locket, tarnished with age. She flipped it open. Inside was a faded photograph of a young girl in school uniform, smiling shyly at the camera. Emma whispered, "This must have been a student's, but why is it still here?" She slipped the locket into her pocket for safekeeping, though unease gnawed at her. Further down, she entered another classroom. This one was different, chaotic. Desks overturned, papers scattered, chalk broken across the floor. On the blackboard, words were scratched violently into the surface. "Silence them." The hair on her arms rose. "What does that mean?" she muttered. Suddenly, a loud slam echoed through the hall. She spun around, heart hammering. The classroom door had shut on its own, trapping her inside. Her flashlight flickered, plunging the room into near darkness. Whispers surged around her, louder now, overlapping until they became unbearable. Emma pressed her hands to her ears, shouting, "Stop, please stop!" But the voices only grew, their tones rising and falling like a chorus of unseen children. She raised her camera shakily, its red light blinking as it captured everything. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the noise ceased. The room was silent once more. Slowly, the door creaked open on its hinges, swinging outward into the hallway. Emma staggered back, breath ragged. "I should leave," she whispered to herself. "I should get out while I can." But her eyes fell on the necklace in her pocket, the girl's photo etched in her mind. She felt a strange pull, as though the school itself demanded she uncover the truth. She swallowed hard, whispering into the camera, "I have to keep going." She left the classroom, walking deeper into the corridor. The laughter returned, faint but playful, guiding her toward the far end of the hall. There, she found a door she hadn't noticed before. Its paint was fresher than the rest, the brass knob untarnished. Above it, carved crudely into the wood, were 3 words, "Room for one." Emma's hand trembled as she reached for the handle. She hesitated, whispering to herself, "Don't do it." But the pull was irresistible. Slowly, she turned the knob. The door swung open, revealing darkness so deep her flashlight seemed to vanish inside. And in that darkness, for the briefest moment, she saw rows of children seated at desks, their eyes glowing faintly, all staring at her in silence. The beam flickered. The vision was gone. The room was empty. Emma staggered back, shaking violently. "No, no, I saw them," she whispered. The school wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Emma backed away from the strange door, her breath shallow, her pulse racing in her ears. She fought to steady the flashlight in her trembling hand, sweeping the beam over the walls and ceiling, as if to prove to herself that the vision had been nothing more than imagination. But she knew better. The sight of those rows of children, silent, glowing-eyed, was etched into her mind. Her camera was still running, the red light blinking steadily. She raised it, whispering into the lens, "I don't know what I just saw, but it was real." It felt real. The hallway seemed darker now, the air colder. Dust swirled in faint drafts, though no windows were open. Somewhere far below, she thought she heard the slam of a locker door. She pressed forward, her footsteps echoing unnaturally loud, as if the building were amplifying them. At the far end of the hall she found the library. Its doors stood slightly ajar, one hanging crooked on rusted hinges. She pushed her way inside, the musty smell of decaying paper hitting her immediately. Rows of shelves leaned precariously. Many of their books collapsed into piles on the floor. She panned her light across the room, catching glimpses of torn spines and yellowed pages. Near the center table, a stack of books had been arranged deliberately, not fallen. She approached, shining her light closer. The titles were children's readers, history textbooks, math primers, all stacked neatly, as if waiting for someone to use them again. On the top book, a phrase had been carved deeply into the cover, "Class is not over." Emma whispered, "Who would do this?" The temperature dropped suddenly, her breath visible in the beam. Then came the sound, soft footsteps padding across the library floor. She spun around, light darting between shelves. Nothing, but the steps continued, weaving between rows, circling her. Her camera picked up the faintest murmur of voices, overlapping and hushed. She turned sharply, catching a fleeting shadow slipping between shelves. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice cracking. No answer, only the faint creak of old wood and the slow, steady rhythm of unseen movement. Her flashlight flickered again, plunging her into near darkness for a split second. When it steadied, she gasped. On the far side of the room, standing between two shelves, was a figure. Small, a child. The shape stood motionless, head tilted slightly, its face obscured by shadow. Emma's breath hitched. "Hello?" she whispered, raising her camera. The lens zoomed, but the figure did not move. Then, with a sickening suddenness, the child bolted sideways, vanishing into the dark aisles. Emma staggered after it, heart hammering, her footsteps crunching on scattered books. She turned corners, flashlight slicing through dust and shadows, but found nothing. The shelves stood empty, silent, as if mocking her. Finally she stopped, gasping for air. She lowered her camera, muttering, "I'm losing it. I have to be." But when she turned to leave, her light caught something scrawled across the library wall. In thick black strokes, smeared as though with soot, were the words, "Join us." Emma stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a pile of books. The air grew heavy, pressing down on her chest. She fled the library, slamming the door behind her, her hands shaking uncontrollably. In the hallway once more, she pressed her back to the wall, trying to slow her breathing. "I should go," she whispered into the camera. "I need to get out now." But her legs refused to move toward the exit. Instead, her eyes drifted toward the stairwell leading to the third floor. The voices returned, soft, coaxing, unmistakable. Children's whispers, calling her name this time. "Emma, stay with us." Her body trembled, but something in the voices drew her onward, as though the school itself had its hooks in her. With reluctant steps, she began climbing toward the third floor, each stair creaking like a warning beneath her feet. The third floor of Grayridge School was the most decayed of all. The roof had collapsed in places, letting moonlight seep through broken beams. Dust drifted in silver shafts, illuminating the warped floorboards. Emma's flashlight swept across the corridor, revealing rows of doors, each marked with peeling numbers. The air was colder here, heavy with the smell of mildew and rust. She hesitated at the top of the stairs, whispering to her camera, "It feels different up here, like no one's been in this part for years." Her voice trembled, though she tried to steady it with the same confidence she used in her other explorations. But this place was not like the others. The first classroom she entered was a ruin. The ceiling had caved in, plaster and wood littering the floor. Desks lay shattered, chalkboards cracked and unreadable. Yet in the center of the destruction, one object stood untouched. A teacher's chair, perfectly upright, facing the empty blackboard, as if class were about to begin. Emma circled it slowly, her flashlight catching something scratched into the wood of the seat. She leaned closer. The words were jagged, carved deep. "Do not trust them." Her breath quickened. She aimed her camera, zooming in on the message. "Who's them?" she whispered. The building answered with a sudden crash, a door slamming somewhere down the hall. Emma jumped, nearly dropping her camera. She darted back into the corridor, light swinging wildly. The sound of footsteps echoed, but not hers. They were lighter, quicker, like children running just out of sight. "Hello?" she called, her voice thin. The footsteps faded into silence. Further along the hall she found another classroom. This one was strangely preserved. Desks lined neatly in rows. Sunlight, though it was night, streaming faintly through windows that should have been broken. Emma blinked. For a moment she swore she saw children sitting at the desks, heads bowed, pencils scratching on paper. She staggered back, blinking hard. The vision vanished. The desks were empty, the room dark once more. She spoke shakily into her camera. "I saw them. I know I did." The desks weren't empty. Her flashlight flickered, and she slapped it against her palm. The beam steadied, but when she turned toward the chalkboard, her blood froze. Written in fresh white chalk were the words, "Emma, sit down." Her name. Emma's legs trembled. She backed out of the classroom, whispering, "No, no, no." She stumbled into the hall, but the corridor had changed. It stretched longer than before, impossibly long, lined with doors that hadn't been there. Shadows flickered beneath them, as though figures were moving inside. The whispers returned, louder now, overlapping voices calling her name. Emma, stay. Emma, don't go. Emma, sit. She covered her ears, but the voices grew louder, vibrating in her skull. Her camera shook in her hands, its red recording light blinking frantically. She forced herself forward, running blindly down the endless corridor. Her flashlight beam caught glimpses of faces, pale, childlike, pressed against the glass of classroom doors, watching her pass. Their eyes glowed faintly, unblinking. Finally, she stumbled into a wide room, the music hall. Dusty instruments lay scattered across the floor, a broken piano, rusted cymbals, cracked violins. In the center stood a music stand with a single sheet of paper. Emma approached cautiously, lifting the page. Notes were scrawled chaotically across the lines. Not music, but words. Over and over, the page read, "We hear you." The whispers surged again, but this time they weren't all children's voices. Among them was something deeper, older, resonating through the walls, a presence far beyond playful echoes. Emma's voice broke as she whispered into her camera, "I don't think they're kids, not anymore." Emma stood frozen in the music hall, the paper trembling in her hand. "We hear you." The words swam before her eyes, written in jagged lines that looked less like notes and more like frantic scratches. Her flashlight beam darted across the room, catching dust motes that shimmered like tiny ghosts. The silence after the whispers was worse than the noise. It pressed in on her, heavy and suffocating. She lowered the page and spoke shakily into her camera. "They're aware of me. Not just watching, listening." Her breath fogged in the cold air. A sudden thud echoed from the piano. She spun around, light catching the instrument's cracked wood. One key pressed down on its own, a hollow note reverberating through the hall. Then another key, and another. A broken, uneven melody spilled into the air. Emma backed away, heart racing as though the room itself had begun to play. She stumbled into the corridor, desperate to escape the sound, but the whispers followed her. Not distant this time, close. They wrapped around her, curling into her ears. "Stay, don't leave. Emma, we need you." Her flashlight flickered violently. For an instant the hallway was plunged into total darkness. When it flared back to life, she gasped. Desks lined the corridor now, stretching endlessly, each with a child seated at it. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow, their mouths whispering without moving. Emma screamed, bolting forward. The beam wavered, showing fleeting glimpses of those faces, their heads turning in unison as she passed. She ran until her lungs burned, the corridor warping impossibly long, twisting and bending. Finally, she burst into another classroom. The desks here were overturned, the walls cracked with age. On the blackboard, written in enormous letters, was a message that made her knees buckle. "She belongs to us." Emma clutched her chest, whispering, "No, no, I don't." Her camera slipped, clattering onto a desk but continuing to record. The red light blinked, capturing her trembling figure as the whispers swelled louder than ever. She pressed her hands over her ears, sobbing, but the voices pushed into her mind like knives, and then silence. Emma lifted her head slowly, her body shaking. The classroom was empty. The message on the blackboard was gone, the desks arranged neatly again. It was as if nothing had happened. She retrieved her camera, her breath shallow. "I need to leave," she whispered, her voice broken. "I can't stay here." But as she stepped into the hall, she realized with dread that the exit was nowhere in sight. The stairwell had vanished. The corridor stretched in both directions, identical, endless. Doors lined the walls, each one marked with her name in chalk. Her flashlight beam landed on one door slightly ajar. From within, a soft glow spilled out, and the sound of children humming filled the air. She felt her legs moving without permission, drawn toward it. "No," she whispered, "I don't want to go." But her hand reached the knob, trembling, pulling it open. Inside, the room glowed faintly, filled with rows of desks, and sitting at the front, in the teacher's chair, was a figure, tall, indistinct, its face lost in shadow. Yet Emma felt its gaze pierce her. The children's humming grew louder. The figure raised one arm, and in unison, the children turned their glowing eyes toward her. Emma stumbled back, the door slamming shut behind her. She was trapped. The whispers swirled around her once more, layered and suffocating. But beneath them, she caught a new phrase, one that made her blood run cold. "It's her turn." Emma's back pressed against the door as the whispers grew louder. layering until they became an unbearable drone. Her flashlight shook in her grip, beam darting wildly across the classroom. The children's eyes glowed brighter, their faces pale and fixed, mouths moving soundlessly as though mouthing the same command, "Stay." She raised her camera, her voice trembling. "I don't belong here. I'm not one of you." Her words cracked in the stillness, swallowed by the low humming that filled the room. The figure in the teacher's chair shifted. Slowly, it rose, towering above the desks. Its shape was human, but stretched unnaturally tall, its head nearly brushing the cracked ceiling. Emma couldn't see its face, only a void, darker than the room itself. It lifted an arm, long and skeletal, and pointed directly at her. The children's whispers swelled into a chant. Her turn, her turn, her turn. Emma stumbled backward, flashlight beam quivering across the desks. The room seemed to close in, the walls tightening, the shadows lengthening. She turned and bolted for the far door, slamming into it with all her strength. To her relief, it gave way, spilling her into another hallway. But the corridor wasn't right. It wasn't the third floor. It wasn't any floor she recognized. The walls were cleaner, the lockers gleaming as though new. Lights flickered overhead, some glowing steadily. Voices drifted through the air. Not whispers now, but laughter, chatter, the normal bustle of a school in session. Emma froze, breath caught in her throat. She raised her camera. The lens captured students moving in the distance, children in uniforms carrying books, talking, giggling. But when she lowered the camera to look with her own eyes, the hallway was empty. Her knees buckled. "I'm seeing the past," she whispered. She pressed forward, following the phantom students. Each step echoed too loudly, her presence alien in the phantom world. She caught glimpses of teachers walking by, their faces blurred, their mouths moving in silence. Class bells rang faintly, though no real sound followed. At the end of the hall, she entered a classroom. Here the desks were filled. Children sat quietly, heads bowed, pencils scratching on paper. At the front, the same tall figure stood, chalk in hand, writing across the blackboard. But instead of lessons, the words scrawled in jagged letters, "Emma," over and over, filling the board from edge to edge. She stumbled back, the camera slipping in her hand. "Why me?" she whispered. The figure turned, faceless, its shadowed head tilting unnaturally. The children raised their heads in unison, eyes glowing faintly, all whispering the same phrase, "Your turn." Emma fled. She tore through the hallways, vision blurring with panic. Each corridor shifted around her, twisting and repeating, doors slamming as she passed. The building itself seemed alive, reshaping, trapping her deeper inside. Finally, she burst into the gymnasium once more. But it wasn't as she remembered. The desks were gone, the floor was polished, the basketball hoop intact, banners hanging from the rafters as if frozen in time. She spun around, disoriented. Her camera panned across rows of children seated on the bleachers, silent, watching her. Her chest tightened. "Please," she begged. "I just want to leave." From the crowd, one child rose, a little girl with braids, her face eerily familiar, the same as the photo in the locket Emma had found earlier. The girl stepped forward, eyes glowing faintly. She spoke in a voice soft but clear, cutting through the silence. "No one leaves once class begins." The bleachers erupted in whispers, voices overlapping into a roar. Emma dropped to her knees, hands over her ears, the sound vibrating in her skull, and through it all, the tall figure appeared again, striding across the gym floor. It reached for her with elongated arms, its shadow swallowing the light. Emma's scream echoed through the empty halls. Emma scrambled backward across the polished gymnasium floor, her palms slick with sweat and dust. The towering figure advanced, its shadow stretching unnaturally, swallowing banners and bleachers, as though the darkness itself obeyed its command. The children on the bleachers did not move, they only watched, eyes glowing faintly, whispers weaving together in a chorus, "Stay, stay, stay." She raised her flashlight, the beam trembling wildly as it caught the figure's formless face. For a fraction of a second, she thought she saw features flicker through the void. Teacher, stranger, even her own reflection, but then it dissolved again into darkness. Her throat tightened. "What do you want from me?" The whispers swelled, pressing against her skull, answering in unison, "You." Emma scrambled to her feet, clutching her camera. She ran toward the exit doors at the far end of the gym, slamming her shoulder into them. They didn't budge. She hit them again, harder, desperation clawing at her chest. Still locked, still unyielding. Behind her, the figure drew closer, each step resonating like thunder through the wooden floor. She spun and sprinted toward the opposite side, bursting into a hallway she didn't recognize. The air was colder here, her breath fogging as she ran. Lockers lined the walls, pristine and shining as though newly built. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, though some flickered erratically. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally, bouncing back at her as if a dozen invisible people were running alongside. The whispers followed, not behind now but inside her ears. "Don't run, don't run, you can't leave." She darted into a classroom, slamming the door shut behind her. The room was strangely intact, desks neatly aligned, a chalkboard clean except for one word written in giant letters, "Welcome." Her chest heaved as she backed away, camera still clutched in her trembling hands. A sudden sound froze her, the creak of chairs shifting. She lifted her light. Every desk was now occupied. Children sat silently, heads bowed, pencils scratching against unseen paper. Their movements were too uniform, too mechanical. Emma staggered back, whispering, "No, no, you're not real." Slowly, every head turned toward her. Dozens of glowing eyes fixed on her at once. The pencils dropped, clattering to the floor in unison. The children's mouths opened, releasing a single phrase in a low, unified voice. "It's her turn." Emma bolted for the door, but it wouldn't open. Her camera slipped from her hand, landing on a desk but still recording, its red light blinking. The lens captured everything, the rows of children rising to their feet, the tall figure appearing at the front of the room like a teacher ready to begin class. Emma screamed, pounding on the door. The whispers drowned her cries. The last thing she saw before the light of her flashlight died was the tall figure extending its shadowy hand toward her, the children closing in with silent steps. When the sun rose the next morning, the school stood silent once more. Dust motes floated lazily in shafts of light, the air still and heavy. Emma's backpack and flashlight lay by the entrance, her camera resting on a desk inside the third-floor classroom. The red light was off. Her friends reported her missing that afternoon. Police searched the building, but found nothing beyond her scattered belongings. The hallways echoed with their footsteps, but no whispers answered. Officially, Emma Clarke became another unsolved disappearance, her case filed away with countless others. But the townsfolk knew better. They whispered of her at the diner, at the gas station, in hurried tones when the sun dipped low. Some swore that on quiet nights you could hear a woman's voice inside the school, calling faintly for help. Others claimed to see her face in the windows, pressed against the glass, eyes glowing like the children's. The Grayridge School had claimed her, and now, just as the whispers foretold, class was no longer empty. Grayridge School still looms on the edge of town, its windows broken, its halls silent, or so they seem. Emma Clarke's belongings were recovered, but she herself was never found. Locals say the building has grown louder since that night, whispers drifting from its dark corridors, sometimes even laughter. And when you pass by after sunset, you may feel eyes watching, waiting, as if class is always in session.